welcome to meeting number 34 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on April 28, 2021, the committee is meeting on its study of the state of the Pacific salmon. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25, 2021, and therefore members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. The webcast will show only the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak, of course, in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. You will also notice the platform's raised hand feature on the main toolbar should you wish to alert the chair, speak or alert the chair. Before speaking, please click on the microphone to unmute yourself. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. A reminder that all comments by members or witnesses should be addressed to the chair. I would now like, of course, to welcome our witness for today. We have the Honourable Bernadette Jordan, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. And with the Minister, I believe we have a number of departmental officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Minister, I don't know if you want to actually recognise who's here with you, and then we'll start your opening remarks. So when you're ready.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is great to be here with all of you again, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Keswick and Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And joining me are several of my officials, including Timothy Sargent, the Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, Dr. Niall O'Day, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy, Jean-Guy Forgeron, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister for Fisheries and Harbour Management, Rebecca Reed, Regional Director General, Pacific Region, Erin McPherson, Assistant Deputy Minister, Ecosystems and Ocean Science, Alexandra Dostal, Assistant Deputy Minister of Aquatic Ecosystems, Hugo Page, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, and Andy Smith, Deputy Commissioner, Shipbuilding and Material. Given that this is my first appearance since Budget 2021 was tabled in the House, I'd like to talk about some of the investments that are specific to Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And so today, I will discuss the budget and focus on the following key themes: conserving and protecting our marine resources and supporting coastal communities and economies. Over the next 5 years, DFO and the Coast Guard will receive significant investments that will allow the department to continue its important work in these areas. I'll also be happy to take your questions on the topic of Pacific salmon. Our government knows that the health of our oceans is intrinsically linked to the health of our economy and the health of our people. One way we can conserve and protect our marine resources is by establishing a network of marine protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. MPAs are proven to be a way to help aquatic species, habitats, and ecosystems recover from human-induced stresses such as overfishing, natural resource extraction, and pollution. When our government took office in 2015, less than 1% of our oceans were protected. Today, that figure stands at almost 14%, with a goal of increasing this to 25% by 2025, working towards 30% by 2030. To help Canada meet its ambitious marine conservation targets, Budget 2021 earmarked $976.8 million over the next 5 years. This investment will be used to expand our network of MPAs on all 3 coasts by working closely with Indigenous, provincial, and territorial partners and local communities to better protect and manage vulnerable areas. Ultimately, this work will benefit the broader marine environment, coastal communities, and local economies. Budget 2021 also signals a strong federal response to address serious decline of Pacific salmon on the West Coast. Despite extensive conservation measures in recent years, climate change and threats caused by humans, including deteriorating habitat, contaminants, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, changes in how land and water are used, and international fishing pressures have negatively affected Pacific salmon at every stage of their life cycle. Currently, 50 different Pacific salmon populations are being considered for listing under the Species at Risk Act, or pending assessment by the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. The reasons are numerous. complex and incredibly concerning. When unforeseen events such as the Big Bar landslide occurs, the risks to vulnerable salmon stocks are magnified even further. Bold, sustained, and coordinated action is needed to stabilize, protect, and rebuild Pacific salmon for the communities that depend on sustainable fisheries and the ecosystems that support them. Last April, as many of you know, our government announced a historic investment in Pacific salmon. This unprecedented $647 million investment is the single most transformative investment the government has ever made towards saving salmon and is aimed at stopping the declines now while helping to rebuild populations over the longer term. Our government will be taking a collaborative approach that focuses on strengthening partnerships with provinces and territories, First Nations, industries, organizations, and others who are already doing so much to protect and conserve salmon. We must bring key partners to the table and identify and prioritize actions to support healthy salmon. I know this investment comes on the heels of the committee's study on the important issue, and I want to thank the members for their work on this file, and I look forward to hearing your recommendations. I'm confident that this investment will provide a coordinated response to help the recovery of Pacific salmon, to support the many communities, harvesters, and businesses that rely on the health of these stocks. Mr. Chair, Budget 2021 will give my department the financial means it needs to meet our marine conservation targets, address declines in Pacific salmon, protect aquatic species at risk, and also provide the Coast Guard with additional funding to prevent and mitigate environmental incidents on the water through an extension of the emergency towing vessels located on Canada's west coast. Budget 2021 will also help coastal communities build back better and stronger from the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes investing significantly in small craft harbors. In 2019, the commercial fishing industry had landings valued at almost $3.7 billion and employed more than 45,000 workers. Even during the hardships of the past year, fish and seafood were among the largest single food commodities exported by Canada. Budget 2021 includes $300 million to repair, renew, and replace infrastructure at small craft harbors over the next 2 years. This will help shore up the future for the industry by providing safe, functional harbors while at the same time creating good-paying jobs for Canadians. We're also strengthening our commitment to marine safety for Indigenous coastal communities by ensuring that communities can get the boats and equipment that they need to keep people safe in local waters. Mr. Chair, these investments in coastal communities are a down payment on our future that will pay dividends in the months and years ahead for Canada while the world recovers from this global pandemic. Whether we're talking about conserving and protecting our marine resources or supporting coastal communities and economies, all of this work is interconnected. Ultimately, Budget 2021 is an investment in Canadian families and communities, investments that underscore how our nation's economic prosperity and the long-term health of our environment can and must go hand in hand. As Minister, I'm confident the funding I outlined today will position Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard to deliver on key priorities that contribute to stronger maritime economy, healthier oceans, and more resilient coastal communities. And now I am pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. And again, thank you for your appearance here today and the group of staff members that you brought along with you. Before I go to questions, I would like to welcome, of course, Mr. Trudell back to this committee. And I know Mr. Zimmer is filling in for somebody and he's in the committee room. So welcome to Bob to this committee. And of course, a big welcome to a hero of mine to some degree, Mr. Sims, fellow Newfoundland MP, and of course, someone who has chaired this committee and been a part of this committee for quite some time, but good to have him back to fill in for one of the members today. I'm sure he'll be a great contributor to the debate as we go forward this evening. I'll now go to Mr. Bragdon for 6 minutes or less, please, for your questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. Good to see you today. My first question, Minister, is no matter what issue or what we study, no matter what fisheries we look into, no matter what the coast the witnesses are coming from, we hear again and again that you and your department have completely neglected to consult with them properly before making industry-changing decisions. This creates tremendous instability at a time of great uncertainty already with COVID-19. And this continued instability in their lives causes questions about their future livelihoods. It's hard to make future decisions. in an area which they're passionate, an area which they've served, which they want to continue to make their living at. Why do you and this department continue to insist on keeping those most affected by your decisions away from the decision-making table? And we heard this, whether it was Indigenous stakeholders, whether it was the commercial fishery stakeholders, whether it related to the prawn harvesters, East Coast lobster, or fish farming in BC. There's been a tremendous echo from coast to coast of the lack of true consultation and being part of the process and decision-making process and finding out after the fact. Minister, do you have any explanation for this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to say that I would disagree with that assertion. We consult widely with a number of different stakeholders as we make decisions. We also make decisions based on science. So I would say that, over the past year, I myself have met countless times with First Nations communities, with the industry, with commercial harvesters, with stakeholder groups, with environmental organizations. This is actually probably one of the largest parts of my job, is meeting with stakeholders and listening to their concerns and their comments. And a lot of the policy we develop, it comes from those consultations. I will say also that we do meet regularly with provincial and territorial partners with regards to fisheries management decisions, but much of the decisions that we have to make are based on the science of where the stocks are, what is happening within the sector. For example, during COVID-19, we had some really tough decisions to make with regards to the opening of seasons, but we made sure that we were able to do that because we listened to the harvesters. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And look, we got a lot of questions we want to cover with you today, but look, our prawn harvesters, for example, in BC, they've been quite negatively impacted by a recent interpretation of what was already an existing regulation. That change of interpretation meant unbelievable instability for those harvesters and a lot of questions. And we heard overwhelming testimony as it related to that they don't understand the basis of that decisions or why it came about. And we really couldn't find a whole lot of clarity as around the rationale behind that decision. And one of the things that was always saying, the interpretation meant it had to be readily available to be inspected. Well, if I were able to produce for you prawns so that you could check their size and number within 2 minutes or less, would you consider that readily available?
Thank you for the question. I would say that we have actually engaged with industry, which is why we were able to come up with a solution for this season. That is why we are continuing to engage with them to make sure that we find the right way forward for the prawn tubbing issue. This is something I am committed to making sure that we have solved, and we are actively engaged in making sure that we do that.
Minister, who decided that we should reinterpret the regulation? Was it you or the department?
This is actually a regulation that has been in place for many years. As I said, we recognize that it was a challenge for the harvesters this year. That was why we worked with them to find the solution. We are now continuing on with that engagement to find the long-term solution for the harvesters, because we know how important this industry is. We know how important this issue is, and we are committed to making sure it gets solved.
Well, thank you, Minister, because they've been very, very clear that for their long-term planning, they need to make sure that there is certainty that comes from the minister and comes from your department so that they can make long-term plans. The ambiguity is causing further uncertainty, and temporary measures won't suffice. On to the other issue.
Sorry, can I answer that?
Sure, quickly.
I would say that we are going to find a long-term solution in collaboration with the industry.
Thank you. As a result of your December 17th decision regarding the future of aquaculture in the Discovery Islands, more than 7 million healthy juvenile Atlantic salmon have been euthanized, and layoffs have started towards an ultimate loss of about 1,500 jobs. How does this align with the government's blue economy strategy, which you have so fervently promoted? And furthermore, did you consult with your provincial counterparts, of which we heard testimony from here in advance of this decision being rolled out? Did you consult with the First Nations community that were being directly affected by this decision in advance so that they could have meaningful transition plans in place for when this decision was enacted?
Thank you for the question. And I will say that this was a very difficult decision to make. It was not one I took lightly. I recognize that it was a very challenging decision for many people. I will also say that the decision was made after there was consultation with the 7 First Nations in that area. recognizing that aquaculture is extremely important to British Columbia, to many coastal communities, and recognizing that there is a way forward with it. But we want to make sure that it is also in keeping with the First Nations territories who did not feel that this was a good fit for them.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Minister, and officials. For the longest time, there's certainly been a strong feeling that having the DFO responsible for aquaculture runs in direct conflict to their obligation to employ the precautionary principle, because there have been so much evidence that suggests that aquaculture operations have been harmful, especially to some of our salmon runs. Have you made any progress on the long-standing recommendation from the Cohen Commission to get responsibility for aquaculture away from the DFO?
First of all, I'd like to, thank you for the question. And I would say, first of all, that I have full confidence in the science that DFO produces. There is a robust process in place when it comes to the peer review process for aquaculture. All decisions that are made are based on the best available science using the precautionary approach. And the aquaculture industry, while undergoing a transition on the West Coast, is extremely important right across the country. And it supports thousands of jobs. So DFO has immense expertise. They make sure that they are working in collaboration with the industry as well. But I also have begun work on things like the Aquaculture Act, which will provide clarity to the industry. We've also been, my parliamentary secretary, Terry Beach, has been doing consultations with regards to the 2025 transition commitment. We're going to continue to work with industry. We're going to continue to use the science to base our decisions on. And I have full confidence in the department's science process.
The major investment in Pacific salmon that was included in Budget 2021, to what extent will the DFO be responsible for basically managing the programs that funding will be supporting?
So I'm very, very proud of the fact that our government has made this historic investment of $647 million in wild Pacific salmon, recognizing that this is the largest investment to help the species. But I will say that this also is something that we need to do in partnership and collaboration with the province of British Columbia, with the Yukon, with First Nations, with industry, with environmental organizations, with anglers. There is a number of groups that have great expertise in salmon, and we need to bring it together and find the path forward and make a strategic investments where we do the strategic work. But I think bringing it all together under one umbrella is going to be critical.
So explain, if you can, then the role of the salmon. I think it's the Salmon Center of Expertise that was specifically noted in the budget, that it's something that you intend to create. What will its role be?
So the Salmon Center of Expertise, of course, we have not rolled out the salmon strategy yet. We are hopefully going to be doing that in the coming weeks. At least the first phase, which will be, of course, a consultation process to talk and find out what the best ways forward are. But the Center of Expertise is looking at. There are many, many people who work on the ground with salmon, who know the populations, who know the challenges they're facing. And we need to bring all of that under one umbrella. We need to make sure that we're not all working at cross purposes. Everybody has the same goal, and that is to protect, conserve, and grow the salmon populations. And what we need to make sure we're doing is we're all doing it in the same direction.
One final question. I haven't seen the chair lean forward in his usual fashion to tell me I'm over. In the last parliament, we brought forward a fairly major study on basically sharing the wealth that comes out of the water. And we've seen just recently here in this committee, looking at some of the changes of ownership in the East Coast. Out in the West Coast, there's been a long-standing call to try and identify the beneficial ownership of things like licenses and quota, because the suspicion over and above the suspicion of money laundering out there is that a lot of our common resource is actually being owned and operated offshore.
So first of all, I want to thank the committee for the work they did on that study. I think it was an extremely important one to recognize, the challenges being faced with regards to ownership on the West Coast. Of course, this year on the East Coast, we were able to make owner operator. We enshrined it in legislation. It has taken many, many years for us to get to that point. We have started work on the West Coast with regards to questions around foreign ownership, things like that, recognizing that, DFO is currently reviewing the existing foreign ownership restrictions and gathering data. It does take time. I often say it's like unraveling a very tangled knot, but we are committed to doing that work. I believe that was something that, we actually, when we responded to the committee report, actually indicated that this is something that we are moving forward with right now.
One last question then. What is the state of our assessment of salmon stocks in British Columbia? Do we have up-to-date assessments of those stocks?
I guess what I could say to that is that salmon are in serious decline. I think we are seeing some populations as low as 90% down in some areas. We have almost 50 different types of salmon that are on the possible species at risk listing. So there is no time to waste in terms of trying to make sure that we find the right path forward. But I'm not sure if I could turn to my deputy. He may have more numbers with regards to what the salmon stock numbers are.
Okay, we'll have to get that information either in print or as we go through this evening's questioning. Monsieur Trudel, pour 6 minutes.
Monsieur Trudel, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Chair, welcome. Madam Minister, welcome to your team. I am pleased to talk to you all today. Earlier, you talked about partnerships. I think that is important to talk about partnerships with industry. But we know that the Atlantic salmon is going quite well in Quebec, that the Quebec model is quite exemplary for its management. When the association in Quebec talked about working with the fishing community and sharing expertise, I think it was very important. And it could inspire the management of the salmon in BC. Do you and your ministry or your department intend to collaborate and examine what is doing elsewhere in Quebec in order to manage the salmon, Quebec or elsewhere?
Thank you for the question. And I will say that, recognize the job that Quebec has done with regards to salmon and their management of it. Although we are seeing real declines in Atlantic salmon on the East Coast as well, we know that more work needs to be there. That's why we put in place an Atlantic salmon initiative in 2019 and 2020. Of course, we are always open to learning from others, recognizing that the province of Quebec has done a very good job with salmon. I have actually been in touch with Minister Lamontagne in Quebec with regards to a number of the projects that he has on his front, and he often talks about the salmon strategies there.
Mm-hmm. Merci.
Thank you. We know that there are a lot of jobs related to Pacific salmon, and they rely on protecting this resource. If it's not properly protected, there are people who will be negatively impacted by this. How can the minister and public servants, how will you ensure jobs and protect the Pacific salmon and the whole ecosystem around that? So, employment, resources. Do you have a plan in order to protect the employment, the resources, and the ecosystem?
Well, I would say that we have now put $647 million on the table to protect wild Pacific salmon, recognizing what a critical state they are in. The last thing I think we need right now is another study. There have been multiple studies done with regards to salmon and how we best move forward with it. What we are doing is putting money behind the initiatives that we know work. Things like the BC Shrift program, which we will be doubling the investment in. That is actually a habitat restoration plan. And of course, all of the things that we put forward are actually going to support job creation as well. Recognizing that this has got to be a all hands on deck approach. The salmon are not in good shape. The stocks are in serious decline. But I'm very proud of the fact that we're actually putting money into making sure that we are able to deal with this problem head on.
Mm-hmm. Merci.
Thank you. I would like to know how the consultations happened before the tabling of the budget. There were witnesses here who told us that the minister hadn't, or the department hadn't consulted them. Why consult them after tabling the budget and not before?
We had a number of conversations with a number of different organizations and groups, as well as the province, territories, First Nations communities, around the importance of wild Pacific salmon to not only as a resource for commercial harvesters, but for recreational purposes. It drives an economy on the West Coast. It's also so culturally significant to First Nations communities. And I would say pretty much every meeting that I had with British Columbians, the state of the wild Pacific salmon stocks was the priority. We heard this countless times over and over again, that this needed to have full court press to make sure that we are doing everything we possibly could. That was one of the reasons why we worked so hard to make sure that it was in the budget. I am very proud of the fact that it's $647 million to address the concerns we're seeing in those declining stocks.
Oui, mais quand même, si vous me permettez.
So, I would like to come back to this. People in the field testified that they felt that they hadn't been consulted, and they were wondering why. Do you have an answer for them?
I would say that I have met with countless amounts of stakeholders on the West Coast, as well as with First Nations. I have met continually with the province of British Columbia on this issue. I have met with environmental organizations, with anglers, with industry. So I would say that we have done an awful lot of consulting when it comes to what needed to be addressed in terms of a wild Pacific salmon strategy. And I will also say that we have actually had very good feedback from pretty much everyone who's involved in preserving and conserving salmon, that they're very happy to see that this money is coming to actually put some work into making sure that we do what we have to do.
Merci, Monsieur Trudel.
Thank you, Monsieur Trudel.
To Mr. Johns for 6 minutes or less, please.
Minister, your Liberal government and the Harper Conservatives have spent, since I last checked 3 years ago, over $19 million just in legal fees, fighting the Nuu-Chulnjuth people in court, denying their fishing rights. For the third time on April 19th, the higher courts reaffirmed the rights of these nations to viable commercial fisheries. Will you, your government, and the Prime Minister finally back up your commitments to reconciliation and affirm that this government will not appeal the most recent ruling? Because we know you have to decide within the next couple of weeks. And will your government actually get on with the implementation of their rights so that their fishers can get back on the water and contribute to our coastal economy?
Thank you for the question. And I would say that Canada has been working collaboratively with the 5 Nuu-Chulnjuth nations to advance reconciliation in the area of collaborative governance, increase fishing access, and community-based fisheries. So we've signed an incremental agreement with the 5 nations in September of 2019. We continue to work closely with them on their comprehensive reconciliation agreement. Of course, we want to make sure that we see First Nations out on the water. We are currently, as you know, Mr. Johns, reviewing the court decision, and we'll have more to say on that.
I appreciate that, Minister. It takes a lot of documents to prepare an appeal. You would have a good idea now whether you're going to take that on and appeal. I'm not asking this question because the Nutrilmouth are satisfied with what's happening at the table or not happening at the table. I'm asking you a question. Are you going to respect the courts instead of continuing to spend taxpayers' money fighting Indigenous people in court?
I would say that we are still reviewing the decision. We are still we are looking at this. We will have more to say on it in the near future. But, you know, I mean, our government and my department has been working very diligently to make sure that we can get fishers out on the water.
While we're talking about Indigenous fishers, have you got a safety plan in place to protect Mi'kmaq fishers that are afraid right now? They've told me they are afraid to go out and exercise their right to a moderate livelihood because your government has failed to protect them. Have you got a plan in place to protect them?
Thank you for the question. You know, this is an issue that is extremely challenging. There's no question. It's complex. Nobody wants to see a repeat of what happened last year in with First Nations on the East Coast exercising their moderate livelihood. We, of course, will have CMP officers on the water. We will also have Coast Guard. We will also have our CMP who have been deployed to that area if needed. And these are all put in place to protect all fishers, to make sure that, you know, people are able to work safely.
I don't think that's giving them the assurances that they need. Minister, you were asked earlier about the public data registry for who owns the quota of fisheries on the West Coast from the report sharing what benefits. Why has that information not been released? I mean, this has been a couple of years in the works. This is really important. We want to know who owns the quota and also about foreign ownership. And it's not just about quota. You're seeing how they're creeping in foreign owners on the processing side. We heard that with Royal Greenland just at the committee the other day. What are you going to do to address the issue of foreign ownership of quota and processing in our country? Because it is a huge economic leakage and it's having a huge impact on coastal communities.
Thank you for the question. And I guess I would say that, you know, this is, as I said earlier, not an easy thing to untangle. There are many different webs that you have to unwind to get to where ownership is. I don't know if I'm going to turn to my deputy and see if he has anything he wants to add, but I know that this is ongoing work within the department. It is something that we have committed to doing after we had received the committee report. But Deputy, sorry.
I'll save it for your deputy because we actually want to see results. I want to make sure that it is a priority of your government. Now, in light of the information provided by Conservation and Protection, you know, we heard them at committee that there's an average of 2 violations a year for the retention of undersized prawns, and that the regulation of non-retention of undersized prawns is not a conservation measure, and that the 2.5 minutes to thaw a tub of prawns can rationally be considered readily available or readily determined. Are you prepared to authorize that the harvest community continue to freeze their catch in the manner that they've been doing so for the past 50 years, which has been demonstrated by precedent as well as the previous DFO lead prawn manager explained and approved conservation and protection as in accordance with their existing regulations? Everybody's dumbfounded why you haven't interjected, given especially the testimony that we heard at committee. There just wasn't justification.
And as I've said earlier, we have actually put in place something for this year. We are continuing to work with the industry to determine whether or not that is something that can continue on into the future. We will make sure that this is done in hand with the industry, but I will give you my commitment right now to making sure that we solve this issue.
Minister, they need to hear from you soon because your department is losing confidence, that they want to see that you're in charge of that department because there is not good reason why that decision was made and had such an impact on those fishers' lives. And I'm hoping, and we're encouraging you to come out very soon with an announcement to correct things and redress the situation.
And as I have said, Mr. Johns, the decision will be made in collaboration with the industry, but we are committed. I am very much committed to solving this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Minister for appearing at the committee today. It's been a long time since you've appeared at this committee. Minister, who is ultimately responsible for leading DFO?
That would be me.
And are all of the fisheries decisions you make based on science?
Science would be the primary driver of the decisions that we make, but there are other considerations that are taken into account.
Okay, thank you. As much as I know you want us to be excited about the funding announced, the committee has heard repeatedly that the resources need to be paired with the right plans and actions to restore Pacific salmon. The state of Pacific salmon today shows your government's approach over the past 5.5 years has failed to the point that the committee has been warned of pending collapses and extinctions. The Salmonid Enhancement Program is chronically underfunded, and the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative is lapsing because resources have not been provided. Why do you refuse to provide the resources needed for proven and essential work like these initiatives?
I would say that we have actually, as a government, done a great deal with regards to salmon enhancement. There is more that needs to be done, and I could not agree with you more that we need to do it in collaboration with the organizations that work on the ground with these really important areas. We are committed to doing that. That's one of the reasons why, the salmon strategy that we will be putting forward will be done in collaboration with the provinces, with the province, with the territory, with First Nations, with environmental organizations, with industry, and with anglers.
Okay, it's interesting that you say you'll be working with all of these groups, because in 2018, your government worked with the BC government, First Nations, academics, industry, and others in developing a science advisory report that followed the emergency assessment of Fraser Steelhead. I have 3 questions here on this. Are you aware that DFO unilaterally diluted the conclusions of the emergency assessment and issued a science advisory report with conclusions that were not scientifically defensible? And what actions have you taken to assure that this assault on intergovernmental cooperation and scientific process is investigated and prevented in the future? And how can Canadians trust you and your department to be making impartial science-based decisions when your officials discarded the science to protect the status quo rather than protecting the fish on the brink of extinction?
Our government has made extremely difficult decisions when it comes to fisheries management. We've also, based our decisions on science. I will stand firmly behind our process with regards to the peer review science that we use to make our decisions. Management decisions are often very, very difficult because, of course, they impact livelihoods.
But those management decisions disregarded the science that was provided, the professional science. And your department discarded it in order to make another decision.
And I would say, sir, that because of previous cuts that we have seen from the previous government, DFO science was challenged. We have been working very hard to make sure that we are able to invest in science again. We are making sure that we have the right tools in place to make these very difficult decisions. And I will say that this government is committed to making sure that we take that very seriously and we make sure that those decisions are based on peer-reviewed science within the department.
And again, I will say that your department manipulated the science and provided a report that diluted the science that was there. I want to move on. Minister, the Adams River in my riding of North Okanagan Shuswap was once known as the richest 300 acres in the world because of the sockeye and other salmon that used to spawn and hatch there. For years, we've seen continuing salmon declines, and your status quo in management is not working. Your actions and inactions in this year alone have hurt British Columbians and the families and communities they support. Your Discovery Islands decision was announced with no plan for the hundreds of workers that it will affect. 600 BC prawn harvesters had their livelihoods put on notice by your sudden regulatory reinterpretation. 9,000 British Columbians who depend on a public fishery for a workforce and employment because you have again rejected the proposal for mark selective fisheries. And juvenile wild Pacific salmon continue to be obliterated by pinnipeds that you refuse to accept management proposals for. Despite a mandate from your Prime Minister, you've also failed to make new investments.
Mr. Arnold. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. You're out of time. I'm sorry. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 5 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, Madam Minister. Madam Minister, before me, I have the Gulf du Saint-Laurent, Baie des Chaleurs, and as you know, these waterways are used by harvesters of crab and lobster, and as you know, this year, after your intervention and through our discussions, they were able to create a de-icing service. We were able to have contracts with eco-technology, for example, from my riding to allow crab and lobster harvesters to start the season earlier to ensure less contact with the whales. There are a lot of challenges that still exist, of course. But, Madam Minister, I would like to thank you yet again, and perhaps you could remind people who are listening or remind harvesters why we need to protect these whales, and not to protect them could have a significant impact. And I would like to hear what you have to say on that.
Well, thank you for the question. And I would first of all like to thank the harvesters in your area who every day, I know it's can be challenging when we have to shut down an area because of a whale sighting, but they have been we've been working hand in hand with industry to make sure that there is the least disruptions possible when it comes to making sure that we are protecting the North Atlantic right whale. And so I would say that our government has been committed to making sure that we do everything we possibly can. There are very few of these creatures left. I think that there's less than 100 at this point. And it's important for us to make sure that we do it for a number of reasons. Not only because it's the right thing to do, because we share the oceans with these whales, but because it impacts our ability to sell our products overseas. We have other countries that require that want us to have good measures in place to protect these creatures. I will also say that our government has made sure that there is money available to help harvesters with regards to some of the measures that we've had to put in place, whether that was through the Atlantic Fisheries Fund that has been able to test things like easy breaking rope and ways to track. We've also put in place the Ghost Gear Fund, which 2 years ago when we launched it was extremely popular. It was an $8 million project to clean up ghost gear that's left. And then this year in the budget, it was increased to another $10 million was put forward to make sure that we are dealing with ghost gear.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And for the committee members, just to show the evolution of our harvesters who know that they need to protect these whales. Now, as you know, Madam Minister, in closed zones, there are harvesters that use an electronic device, and that is thanks to the investments that you have done, Madam Minister, with your department, and I would like to thank you for it. A question that we have now is, can we count on you and your department to next year ensure that we have the funds and the services and the Coast Guard, for example, and other third parties that can help us to have a good fishing season as we did this year? We saw the positive impact this year. Harvesters mostly met their quota, and the community is doing better overall. Can we count on you in the department to ensure that these services are offered next year as well?
I would say that you can count on us to make sure that we're continuing to work with the industry to find out what works for them. We want to continue to have the conversations to see where the challenges are so that we can address them. We recognize how difficult this can be, but we are there to make sure that not only we're protecting the North Atlantic right whales, but also making sure that we're able to support the harvesters in this initiative.
Merci. Je sais pas si j'ai encore du temps.
Thank you. I don't know if I have any time left, but quickly, Madam Minister. An important investment, $3 billion for small craft harbors. Could you say a bit more on that?
$300 million. We were extremely pleased to see that in the budget, recognizing that our small craft harbors actually drive our rural local economies, our coastal communities. They are not in good shape. They have they need a lot of work, basically because of things like climate change. The budget has not been significant enough for them over the last number of years. Our government has actually put in close to $1 billion on small craft harbors over the last 5 years. So this $300 million is going to be an added benefit to our coastal communities that rely on those harbors.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
We will now go to Mr. Trudel for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier, I talked about Myriam Bergeron, the DG of the Federation, and the Quebec Federation for Atlantic Salmon shared potential solutions to have a better management of Pacific salmon in BC. Ms. Bergeron talked to us about the river-to-river management, which you might be aware of, which works well, and that could inspire BC. Have you or your department considered such a model like the one in Quebec in order to manage the resource that is Pacific salmon?
I would say that we take into account a number of different initiatives when we are talking about managing our resources in all our rivers, in the ocean, in our ocean space. With regards to the wild Pacific salmon, there are a number of people who do really great work in BC on doing everything they can to protect and conserve the salmon. I am not aware if there is a river-to-river system in place in British Columbia. I could perhaps turn to my deputy and see if he could answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Minister. So, Mr. Chair, certainly Quebec's program works very well for them. We do manage river by river in a number of other regions, including Newfoundland. In British Columbia, there are over 400, take Sockeye for instance, 400 different conservation units. And then we have conservation units for the other 4 salmon species as well. So, we certainly do look at each specific species, subspecies, and they're associated with different river systems and different branches of the river system. So you really do indeed have to take a fairly micro approach when you're looking at salmon.
Oui, merci. Bon.
Thank you. And I love Quebec, so I will be talking about it some more. Earlier, you talked about the conservation plan for wild salmon that was implemented in 2019, and that contains 18 measures. The plan was to be updated in 2020. What's going on with that?
The plan for Atlantic salmon is currently under review. We are going to be updating that shortly. I'm not sure, Deputy, if you have any updates on where we are with that right now. I know that there has been work being done on it, but I'm not really sure if there's anything else.
I can perhaps add to that, Mr. Chair, if you're okay with that. So yes, the Wild Atlantic Salmon Conservation Implementation Plan does expire at the end of this year. So we are right now in the process of talking to all of the different stakeholders, to Indigenous peoples, others, about what a renewal would look like.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Trudel. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Minister, the PRV paper published on May 26th shines an unfavorable light once again on the Department of Fisheries and Oceans' refusal to heed the science on the risk of salmon farming on wild salmon. When science reporting risk from salmon farming is published, invariably the department and industry downplay it. However, it seems implausible that scientists at UBC, University of Toronto, SFU, the Pacific Salmon Foundation, for example, can be wrong every time. How will you evaluate the implications that a virus has been accidentally by the Atlantic salmon farming industry and is spreading with serious health impacts on some species of wild salmon? Who will you turn to, and will you be designating PRV as a disease agent so that it is captured under fisheries regulations?
Thank you for the question. And I know that a number of people have reached out to me directly with regards to PRV and the concerns that they've seen. I will say that we welcome any new research that can help us identify and understand the potential risks of the PRV virus and associated strains. We do continue to support the research and the number of factors that impact the health of our wild salmon. And I guess, I could, in saying that, we will absolutely take into, all of our science is peer reviewed. We will look at what has been put forward and make sure that we have the right path going forward.
So, Minister, that hasn't happened. And aquaculture has been given an entire division in the department under its own regional director focused entirely on the industry. And while management of wild salmon may be implicit, don't you think it's time, given the extreme state of wild salmon, many salmon runs, that there's better independent oversight and advice? The department and Canada's elected officials need someone outside of the bureaucracy and political system to provide overarching, unbiased science, evidence-based decision-making on what is working and what isn't working and what the priorities are. Do you not agree with that?
I would say that our science is peer-reviewed, Mr. Johns. That is one of the reasons why it is, actually held to a very high standard. With regards to the independence of the public service, they don't do this for political reasons. This is their jobs, and they take this science very seriously. And I stand behind them in the extremely important work that they do.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, many communities, businesses, families along Canada's west coast depend on access to Chinook salmon for their livelihood, for their food security, for their family traditions, for their, like I said, their businesses. And I've asked you this before about marked selective fisheries. They are a precautionary way, they're a sustainable way to provide critical access to these Chinook salmon while minimizing or virtually eliminating any of the impacts on the wild stocks of concern. The department has been aware of marked selective fisheries proposals now for over 8 years. And we simply can't get a definitive answer one way or the other. So, Minister, I'd like to think you're in charge of the department. And I'd like to think that you've seen the reasonableness of marked selective fisheries proposals from the advisory boards, and virtually just about everybody says that it's okay to go ahead with these things. So are you going to instruct your department to proceed with marked selective fisheries so that we can have this effective conservation tool and achieve actually a balance between conservation and socioeconomic objectives?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Calkins. I would say that I am not, as I have said, and as I have said to you before, I'm not adverse to a marked select fishery. I do believe it needs to be done in a measured fashion. We cannot have something happening that may impact the wild stocks. We have opened up marked select fisheries in a small scale in some areas as a test, as a pilot program, to see what can work. But we have to recognize that due to the potential of increased fishing effort, increased mortalities from hooking and releasing, that these are all things that have to be taken into consideration and are a real concern. We also need to make sure that.
But those things are, well, with all due respect, I'm an angler. I'm a sport fisherman. I'm a recreational fisherman.
I'm aware.
And I know that there is always going to be some mortality in even in a catch and release fishery, but that doesn't prevent catch and release fisheries from existing. But I also know from being an angler on the West Coast that as soon as you catch your quota or your limit on a particular species, you generally move on, especially if you're chartering somebody to take you fishing. So when you catch your one coho, you move on to the next fish. So by allowing people to actually catch and keep the first marked selected or first marked Chinook salmon that they catch, they're going to move on to other species. And I don't see how that would be more damaging than actually just having a catch and release fishery that encourages catch and release of Chinook salmon all day long. And with all due respect, I just don't know if the department really understands the mind of a recreational fisherman.
And I will say that, I recognize how challenging this has been for the rec fishery, not only because of COVID, but because of the management measures we've had to take. That is one of the reasons why this this investment that we have put in the budget is going to be so significant to making sure that we can do everything we have to do to see how we go forward with the Mark Select fishery. I look forward to working with the anglers, the sport fishers, to find out what that could look like for them. Recognizing though also that we do have to be, stocks are in serious decline, and we have to be very careful with what we're allowing to happen in areas where there are challenges to those fish.
I think we should be careful. Not all stocks are in, there's certain ones, I'll agree, and everybody at this table would agree that certain stocks are in decline. Certain stocks are also very healthy and very vibrant. Certain stocks are actually just created for the purpose of putting fish into the ocean to be caught through hatchery programs and so on. And I'm an Albertan, Minister, and like many Albertans, we count on going to the West Coast to catch fish. And we know that based on talking to those who offer charters and so on, they know that we're not going to pay for airfare. We're not going to drive to the West Coast unless we have some type of certainty and predictability that we can keep 1, maybe 2 Chinook salmon. That is the prized fish that's out there. We know that there are many Chinook salmon that are produced by hatcheries in Washington and other areas. And there's every indication, like last year, that there was great opportunities to catch and retain Chinook salmon. All indications are this year that there's going to be a good return of Chinooks, not in the stocks of concern, but in other areas. So what kind of certainty and predictability? Are we going to have the same kind of summer catch retentions that we had last year? Because the sooner the department or you decide to announce that, the sooner people will book trips to the West Coast and provide some economic certainty to those that rely on Chinook salmon fisheries for a livelihood. Can you give us any clarity on what's going to happen sooner rather than later?
That decision will be coming soon, Mr. Calkins. We are also developing a framework on whether Chinook Mark Select fisheries and mass marking can be applied as a management tool. DFO is consulting on the Chinook Mark Select fishery proposals from the rec sector. And we are planning to proceed with a pilot basis in 2021 this year. So there are steps being taken. As I have said many times, I am not adverse to a Mark Select fishery. It just needs to be done in the right time frame and in the right way. Also recognizing that there are stocks of concern that we do need to be very careful about. So making sure that we have the right information, making sure that we have the right data, making sure that we, are addressing these concerns that we're hearing from people. It's all part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. We'll now come back to the East Coast to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll begin by thanking and congratulating the Minister for ensuring that DFO got a significant budget increase in this budget. That is no simple feat, and Minister, I want to acknowledge your work on that. Minister, the lobster and crab fishery has been very beneficial for commercial and First Nation fishers in Atlantic Canada. And I have always focused on policies that protect the value and future of these important fisheries. My concern today and question to you stems from testimony that was given in the Fishery Committee and directly from fishers about the growing practice of unrecorded sales for cash in the lobster and crab fisheries, and this is used to influence who gets the product. This will hurt the industry as it has a destabilizing effect on the fishery. What enforcement measures are in place, and what steps is your department taking to identify this practice, document, prosecute where necessary, and eliminate it, Madam Minister?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Morrissey. And I guess I will say that one of the things that is we all hear about are the unreported sales of fish. This is a challenge, and of course, as you know, DFO regulates the fishery, but once it hits the wharf, it becomes provincial jurisdiction with regards to processing and who's buying. So we are working, I will say that, we work collaboratively with the province on this issue. We also, of course, our CMP officers have a number of different tools that they use to address the concerns and do investigative work. We do not direct them; they are independent. But I think it's also important to note that, I will be meeting with my Eastern Fisheries ministers very shortly in the coming weeks, and this is a topic of discussion because it is a concern. Because when people are selling, outside of the boundaries of the law, it impacts all of us. It impacts the price. It impacts the data that we have. It impacts our exports. So we want to make sure that this is done in an above board fashion.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I want to go back and just ask you to elaborate. You referenced MPAs in your opening statements, which I'm reading from here. And in the comment, you listed all the partners that you were going to work with, but I did not see commercial fishers in your statement. I take it that was an oversight, and I would simply want to reference, because in the last election, the Conservative candidates here in Atlantic Canada used a lot of false information on the fact that our government was going to use MPAs to close lobster fisheries in certain areas and crab fisheries. Madam Minister, could you correct for the record on that any move in MPAs will involve collaboration with commercial fishers, and that it is not the intention to close down any lobster fishing areas or crab fishing areas?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I did not pick that up in my speech. I do apologize. We recognize, actually, I was part of this committee when we did the year-long study that Mr. Arnold put forward on marine protected areas. We know that the best ones are built from the ground up. They are built in collaboration with our all stakeholders, with Indigenous people, with communities, with fishers. That's how they succeed. And of course, the intent of an MPA is not to close a fishery. The intent of an MPA is to make sure it's sustainable for the long term, to make sure that there's fishing for generations to come. Are there areas that there is closure? Absolutely. This is not the case here, though. This is not what we are talking about. We're not talking about closing down industry. And I will say, I'm going to do some kudos here, because I do recognize that the Conservative Party, when they had their recent annual meeting, they actually approved the 25% by 2025 goal for MPAs. So I think that was a great step, a good step in the right direction for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Minister. And one question again, I want to focus in because the work of the Coast Guard is essential on both coasts. And I'm pleased to see in the budget where there's going to be renewed emphasis and significant investments in the Coast Guard. Could you just, in the time remaining, elaborate on what those investments will do and then how it will grow our Coast Guard's capability and capacity?
Absolutely. This is something that I'm extremely pleased about because, the Coast Guard does such critical work in our coastal communities. We rely on it heavily for our safety of our mariners, for science, for research, for making sure areas are clear. So we have actually put forward a plan to basically rebuild a number of the ships in the Coast Guard, replace the older ones. We have some that are going to be, by the time they're replaced, they'll be 60, which is older than me. We're going to be making sure that our smaller boats are the new and put in areas that they need them. New icebreakers are extremely important to the north. So we're making sure that the Coast Guard has the tools that it needs to do the very important job that it's doing.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. And Minister, I'll remind you, there's nothing wrong with being over 60. We'll now go to the committee room to Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister for attending today. So my questions will be around what my colleague, Mr. Calkins, has already referred to, and that's a selective fishery in BC. I have to read you recommendation 30 of the Cohen Commission. It says the Department of Fisheries and Oceans should designate an individual to coordinate scientific, educational, and management efforts in relation to selective fishing practices. Minister, has this been done?
I'm going to have to turn to my department because I will admit that I am not aware of that.
And in turn, I'll turn to our Regional Director General for Pacific, Rebecca Reed.
So thanks very much for the question. So we do have a selective fishing policy that we apply for salmon.
Actually, for the person that's been applied, designated individual, I just want to know if that's been done and who is it?
The policy is implemented by all fishery managers.
I'm actually asking about the one that says designated individual to coordinate scientific educational management efforts. So who is that person?
We have a regional director of science and the regional director of fisheries management who work together on those two aspects.
So maybe I can get those names just specifically so we know who to go to after this. So I'll go back to the minister. Just in speaking about the selective fishery in BC, the BC government has been very supportive of a selective fishery in BC. As you know, I have a document that was written to the BC salmon management team at DFO. So we look forward, this is from the letter, we look forward to further discussion regarding salmon enhancement. We encourage increased Chinook mass marking to enable better management and identification of hatcheries Chinook production. This can lead to efficiencies in Chinook production and better management of harvest, which can lead to increased prey availability for the southern resident killer whale and certainly for harvesters. Further, BC encourages DFO to be flexible in its management approaches to not only conserve and protect stocks of concern, but also facilitate limited and safe harvest opportunities on abundant stocks where locally supportable. We are hopeful that all options, including marked selective fisheries, are being considered by DFO to ensure conservation and socioeconomic objectives can be achieved. Minister, we have 25 MPs that are asking for a selective fishery in BC. We're having a BC government that's asking for a selective fishery. We're having a public fishery that's asking for a selective fishery. When?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Zimmer. And I will say that, as I have said to Mr. Calkins, I'm not adverse to a marked select fishery. I do believe that
I heard your answer, Minister, but I guess I'm asking for the next part of that answer then is when.
Would you like me finished, please?
I'm asking for when, Minister. When?
We currently have a pilot program in place. We will continue to work to find the best way forward, recognizing that the wild Pacific salmon are in dire straits in some areas. And we need to make sure that anything we do does not impact the conservation of those fish.
That's the great part about a selective fishery, Minister, is that you can selectively fish and catch certain fish and selectively not catch certain fish with fishing methods. And you know, I've done many videos, I'm sure you've seen some of them that explain what a selective fishery is and how it works. We're just asking it to be implemented. And you've said that you're doing a test fishery this summer, but test and then what? Is it a test fishery, then there's another 5 years of a pause, or we can actually move into a selective fishery that can be used BC-wide? What's your end goal, I guess? So 2021 is the test selective fishery. What's the next step?
My end goal is to make sure that we have wild Pacific salmon. That is my end goal. We have a stock that is in serious decline. We need to do everything possible. We are making sure that we are doing that. A marked select fishery is a possibility, there's no question, but we need to make sure that before anything moves ahead, we do what we have to do in order to conserve the stock that we have.
And that's the great part about a selective fishery. It allows us to do both. You use the word collaboration a lot, and that, by Oxford's definition, is the action of working with someone to produce something. You use it a lot. You use word salads a lot, Minister. Collaboration, public fishery have been more than willing to actually do a demonstration and to show you that it works. But they don't feel collaborated with. All they feel like is that they've used data, or you've taken their data and just simply ignored it. You've ignored conversations at tables that they've been at for months. When are you going to actually establish a selective fishery? That's been asked, and I know you're going to repeat your answer, but my hope is that you'll give us a date. An expected, this is my best, Mr. Zimmer, 2021 is the test date. 2022 is maybe when we can see a 50% selective fishery. Maybe in 3 or 4 years we can see a 100% selective fishery. Minister, we need answers now.
I have met with the Sport Fishing Advisory Board, Mr.
And you've ignored their advice.
Could
Sorry,
I
Mr.
finish
Zimmer,
the question? Thank you.
Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Batiste for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Minister, for joining us today. I hope the sound is coming in well. I didn't get a chance to sound check. Minister, today's discussion has been mostly around the budget and Pacific salmon, but I would be remiss if I didn't quickly follow up on our report on the implementation of a moderate livelihood. one of the main focuses was bringing groups together. We heard the need to bring scientists, Indigenous fishermen, commercial fishermen who are non-Indigenous all together in a room, and to really hear from the Indigenous leaders and our knowledge keepers, commercial fishermen, and researchers into a dialogue on the issues. And I'm wondering if you could update us on, have we made progress on that front?
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. And I will say, I also want to thank the committee for the report, for the recommendations. It was a very, very good report. And I look forward to being able to provide you with a response in the near future. I guess one of the things that we heard loud and clear throughout a lot of this and through your report was we needed increased communications between not only the department, myself, commercial harvesters and First Nations. So we have set up tables to make sure that that does happen. We have made progress with regards to making, having information available to harvesters with regards to First Nations rights and what they mean and what it looks like. We have seen a great uptake from the commercial sector with regards to those information sessions that we have put out, the workshops that have been put in place. But we know there's more work to do. This has been a long-standing issue, as you well know, and it's not one that we will solve overnight, but we are committed to making sure that we are listening. We are doing everything we possibly can to make sure that the concerns are addressed that we have heard.
Thank you, Minister. And I just also want to say thank you for the small craft harbor funding that was out there. I know that's going to mean a lot to our communities in the Atlantic. And this funding, I understand, is part of our broader blue economy strategy, which I know is currently soliciting feedback from the same stakeholders we discussed earlier, Indigenous peoples, commercial fishermen's, environmental groups. Could you speak a bit about the importance of the consultation to the strategy as a whole?
So the Blue Economy Strategy is a priority in my mandate letter, recognizing that Canada, with 3 oceans and the longest coastline in the world, has a potential for significant growth in the ocean sector. When we look at countries that are other ocean nations like Norway, that 37% of their GDP is driven by the ocean sector. In Canada, it's 1.6%. So we know there's a lot of potential that we could do a lot more. And I would say that, to your point with regards to the small craft harbors, making sure that our coastal communities have the infrastructure that they need in order to drive their economy is critical. And that's why that investment in the budget is so significant and so important. I will also say that, the consultation process that we've undertaken for the Blue Economy Strategy has been significant. And it's extremely important because we need to make sure that any investments that we make are done strategically. We need to make sure that we have, the right path forward with regards to, the environment and the economy, and making sure that our Blue Economy Strategy is sustainable. It's making sure that this is there for the long term. It's not just a quick fix. It's not just a one-year plan as we come out of COVID, but this is something that's going to drive our rural coastal communities' economies for the next 15 to 20 years.
Thank you, Minister. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
He's saying 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. I didn't quite get that. But Minister, one of the things that we heard during the moderate livelihood study, and I know you've heard it from the Mi'kmaq communities, was about Nedigalimk and ensuring that conservation is practiced for generations to come. And I just wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you've heard from the Mi'kmaq communities about the need for conservation, and what have you learned about this concept that we've heard so much about in this study? And I know I didn't give you a lot of time to answer, but shortly, if you can.
I would say that, the First Nations communities are stewards of the ocean. They're stewards of the environment. Conservation is a priority for them. And I think that that's one of the things that we all have in common. Everybody wants to see the species that we rely on available for generations to come. Nobody wants to fish something into extinction. That's one of the reasons why conservation will always be the underpinning reason for any decision that we make.
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. We'll now go to Mr. Trudel for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Minister, There was a witness during the study who shared the urgency to act, an urgency to save Pacific salmon. When we look at the budget, there's $35 million that will be invested in 2021-2022 and 158 for 2022-2023. Why not invest more as of now? Because the situation is so urgent.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Trudell. And I will say that, urgency is absolutely the way that we have to frame this. We have to make sure that while Pacific salmon survive, this is a unique opportunity and time for us to make sure that we do everything we possibly can. The budget announcement is significant because it is a historic amount of money to be put forward. But we have to make sure that we're doing it strategically. We have to make sure that we are doing it with other in collaboration with other stakeholders, with Indigenous communities. So to that point, one of the main things that we will be doing as we move forward is working in collaboration with those organizations to find out what the priorities are, to make sure that we do find where the strategic investments have to go, where are the policies that need to change, where are the the regulations that possibly need to change. These are all parts of the process, and that we are working very hard to make sure that we get those things right.
Ouais, je comprends, mais...
I understand. But when we look at the budget, when we look at subsequent years, 22, 23, 24, 25, it's all above 100 million. Whereas right now, there are solutions, but there's only 35 million for this year. It seems like a very limited investment for this year.
We already have programs that we are funding this year. Programs like the BC Shrift program, the Habitat Restoration program on the British Columbia coast. Those are all programs that are already ongoing that we've put the investments in. So it's not like there's no money there now, that this is just a small amount. There's already money available that we're working with as well from previous years. So to your point, there is an ongoing ability for us to invest in making sure that we're doing the right things, because there is money here now, but this is an additional amount that we've been given.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Minister, further to my previous question around governance, clearly the current system is not working. The department doesn't have a system where they can assess the status of a population, the status of the habitat, set a management target, and then manage for the outcomes you want under an integrated approach using the available management levers, habitat, hatcheries, and harvest. The department has had decades to do this and has never done it. It has been laid out fairly nicely in the wild salmon policy, which was written over 15 years ago, but never fully activated. Cohen said that they should put someone in charge to integrate all things for salmon, but the department has never done that. If you pour $647 million into a system that isn't working and one that has never activated an effective management framework, I'm worried that we'll lose the opportunity to get better results. This is why a new governance framework is needed and necessary, one that includes the department, the province, First Nations. Otherwise, we're just going to end up spending more money on a system that lacks a management framework, lacks a reporting system, and lacks accountability for results. And we know what's best for salmon needs to be a priority, and what's good for users must come second. Will you speak about a new model?
Thank you, Mr. Johns. And I would also like to thank you for your advocacy. You and I have had a number of good discussions over the last years with regards to this issue, and I appreciate your comments. I will also say that, the new Center for Expertise is going to be something that will bring people together so that we aren't working at cross purposes. And I think that this is one of the challenges that we have seen, when we've got so many different groups trying to do the same thing. It's really important to make sure that we do come together and find the right path forward, working in collaboration. And I know that people say, oh, you say that all the time, as Mr. Zimmer did, but the reality is that if we have to do this with First Nations, we have to do this with the province, we have to do this with environmental groups, and the Center for Expertise is going to be able to give us that ability to work with the the best people on the ground who are doing this work now. So I think that, your point is very well taken. And I would say that is actually the goal that I have, is to make sure that we are working with everyone to make sure that we find the best way to conserve and protect these species.
You got 5 seconds, so you haven't got time to ask a question, let alone get an answer, unfortunately. We'll now go to Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister, to you, former Premier Stephen McNeil basically accused you, the minister, and the government of bungling the moderate livelihood file.
I believe Mr. Bragdon is frozen.
Yeah, he may not be frozen. He's inside, but he's not moving.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
Yes, there you go. You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what's happened. Thanks for all the wonderful rural internet connectivity.
Yeah, the minister thought you were frozen, so we were getting worried.
I'm not a frozen, nor am I a frozen prawn. But anyways, former Premier Stephen McNeil from Nova Scotia, your home province, accused you as the minister as well as the government, and he was saying quite frankly that he was very dissatisfied and of the handling of the situation in southwestern Nova Scotia. He said, we are in a position where all parties are not sitting at a table to find what is a workable solution. This is only getting more entrenched. Then we come over here to the West Coast, and we're hearing from the West Coast provincial government that they were not properly consulted on the decision relating to the closure of Discovery Islands open net pens, that they were not at the table during that discussion. They were blindsided by the announcement, and they also felt like they were excluded in that process. We've heard from industry stakeholders that they've been trying to reach out to you and to you personally, to your department, trying to get answers, trying to get information. They have felt excluded and they've had no response. Minister, why are you not meeting with those most affected by these decisions and who really have their livelihoods in these coastal communities at stake because of these decisions that you're undertaking? Why not consult with them?
I have been constantly consulting with industry, with First Nations, with environmental organizations, with communities impacted. I have numerous meetings. My department officials also have a number of meet with them on a regular basis. My staff meet with people on a regular basis. So with regards to, I want to approach the moderate livelihood one specifically because you did bring that up first. With regards to, the Premier's comments, quite frankly, his comments with regards to having everybody at the table was inappropriate. This is nation to nation negotiations. This is something that we do with First Nations at the negotiating table. Of course, the industry was well aware of what was going on. We met with them on a regular basis. I met with industry myself. Mr. Bragdon, can I finish my...
Very quickly, Minister, but we have a certain amount of time, but it's very true that they have said, whether it was the minister, the premier, former premier of Nova Scotia, or the current provincial government in BC, it's a common thread, whether it's industry stakeholders as well as Indigenous leaders on the East Coast that we've heard from and on the West Coast. They all felt like they were not properly consulted or in the loop, and major decisions that affect the livelihoods of British Columbians and Atlantic Canadians and Canadians from coast to coast, whose livelihoods depend upon these very, very fisheries. These decisions are getting made and they're left out of the process. They feel like they're not being heard and they're not part of it. They're frustrated, Minister. We're hearing this. This isn't us saying this. These are the stakeholders saying this. These are the people whose livelihoods are being affected are saying this. Minister, they want to know that they have your ear and that you're hearing their concerns and that you want to act policies that are going to be responsible towards their future and the future of their families.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. And I will continue to say that I meet with industry regularly. I meet with my provincial counterparts regularly. I meet with First Nations on a regular basis.
Minister, before the Discovery Islands decision, did you meet with the provincial minister of fisheries, your counterpart, prior to that decision, and talk to them about that decision? Yes or no?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
I had many meetings with Minister Popham. I've had meetings with, and will continue to have those discussions.
were they aware of the, this is news, we're breaking news here. It seemed like they were unaware of the timing of this announcement, and they were unaware of that this announcement was going to be taking place. And did you lay out transitory plans as was recommended by the department, that there would be transition plans made for the sector that was going to be most effective for the BC farmers and for the aquaculture sector? How can we say we're for a blue economy, but we don't even allow transition plans or a transition period for them to navigate these types of decisions?
My decision on the Discovery Islands was, as I have said many times, not an easy one to make. It was made after there was consultations with the 7 First Nations in that area, recognizing that that this was not a good fit in their territory. That this is what I heard from them on during the consultation process that I went through with them. And I will say that, I've met with the province of British Columbia. My parliamentary secretary has an ongoing relationship with the parliamentary secretary for Fisheries in British Columbia. I've met with Premier Horgan. I have met with a number of stakeholders on both the West and the East Coast, as well as my departmental officials have continually been in
Minister, did you meet
with
industry? They requested a meeting several times.
Sorry, Mr. Bragdon, your time has gone a little bit over. I allowed for your frozen time to be added in there, and you weren't punished for that. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just reporting out, Minister Jordan, I've heard from my old friend Alex Morton in the West Coast. She's done a review of the sea lice situation in young salmon going past the farms that are now not operating, and there's a reduction of about 90% in the infestation there. So I have to say that on the one hand, we hear, well, you've got to act. And then, well, no, you better wait until you talk to this one, that one, and the other one. We were dealing with an urgent situation here. And you took, I think, very brave and very, immediate action. And it was clearly necessary given the kind of damage that was being done there. That's my commentary. Now, the question, the Center of Excellence, who's it going to report to?
The new Center of Expertise for the salmon is what your salmon strategy. That'll be run out of DFO, but it will be done in cooperation with the stakeholders on the ground working in this industry.
Okay, I have to say that there is, suspicion on the coast that sometimes the DFO isn't very forthcoming at passing information along to the minister. We certainly had inferences in the salmon study earlier on that certain information had not reached you, that it had been suppressed. Now, that's a claim that was made. I'm not asking you to confirm or not. I'm just putting that on the table. Can I
just also mention that there is also going to be an arm's length advisory panel with regards to, or an advisory board at the Center of Expertise as well, that will be made up of individuals both inside and outside of DFO.
I think it will be necessary to maintain very close contact with that. And I know you have an excellent parliamentary secretary that would love to be able to take that on. Okay. And I would love for him to take that on. Now, I had asked, and you didn't get a chance to answer, nobody did, what is the state of our salmon stock assessments? Have we got up-to-date assessments on all of our runs in BC?
And I'm going to turn to my department on that one.
And Rebecca, perhaps you can take that one on.
So thanks very much. So we have over 9,000 individual stocks in BC and the Yukon. We don't have stock assessment information for all of them. We do have a very comprehensive collection of stock assessments for the main runs. And that information is used in evaluating fisheries every year.
Right, thank you for that. Minister, you mentioned that there's going to be an Aquaculture Act. What are you thinking about in terms of pulling that act together? What are the essential elements going to be in that act?
So the work on the Aquaculture Act is already underway. It's well underway, actually. And of course, recognizing that aquaculture is governed differently on the West Coast than it is on the East Coast, that we have to do this, of course, in collaboration with partners. And also, I think the whole focus of the Act has to provide clarity to the industry. we recognize how important the aquaculture sector is. We know how important it is to jobs, to providing a food source, and you know, it's an extremely important industry. It is very different, like I said, in Newfoundland, Labrador than it is in British Columbia and in Prince Edward Island. So the Aquaculture Act is going to be able to give us an ability to provide clarity to the industry with regards to sustainability, with regards to regulation, with regards to just making sure that they have everything, that everything is there, because it's not covered really under the Fisheries Act as well as it should be.
One of the things that's come up quite often in our past studies, particularly on the West Coast, has been the missed opportunity to engage Indigenous people in on-the-ground, guardian programs, et cetera, to keep an eye on things, to report on things, to even help with enforcement. Do you see that, again, as a key element, particularly as the strategy goes forward with this quite hefty investment in Pacific salmon?
I will actually, with regards to the Guardians program, I will say that, the amount of consultation I've been doing under the Blue Economy strategy, I think I have probably done somewhere in the vicinity of 35 roundtables, and it comes up on a regular basis at almost every one of them about how important that program is. So I can see that being part of the path forward with regards to the Blue Economy. We've also made some significant investments in Indigenous communities with regards to Coast Guard Auxiliary, providing boats for people for Indigenous communities. And I think that there has been collaboration on the West Coast with Indigenous communities and the Coast Guard. And I think that the Guardians program is an amazing program that I think we really need to do more with. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Minister, before I was cut off there, rightly so, I guess, by the chair, right on time. I was speaking about the continuing salmon declines we've seen in my riding, the Adams River. And your actions and inactions, how they've hurt British Columbians, the Discovery Islands decision, the spot prawn decision or reinterpretation, the public fisheries that have been let down without an opportunity for mark selective fishery, the failure of your department to address pinnipeds in the Salish Sea and the Pacific and the Atlantic as far as that goes, and a failure to follow through on the mandate from your Prime Minister to provide funding for aquatic invasive species in BC to prevent aquatic invasive species. How can you make these decisions that you've made without a scientific background to make these decisions on?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you've made these decisions without providing any reasoning to the people that are affected by them. The spot prawn harvesters are still trying to understand why the decision was made. The public fishers haven't seen any answers as to the reasons why. There doesn't seem to be any reason behind any of your answers or any of your decisions.
First of all, I'm going to say that I'm extremely proud of our government and the decisions that we have made with regards to investments in making sure that we are doing everything we possibly can to protect the wild Pacific salmon. You talked about that. We've also invested in budget 2018, I believe $43 million for aquatic invasive species. Is there more to be done? Absolutely. With regards to the BC Shrift program, we have made significant investments in habitat restoration.
If there was more to be done on the aquatic, if there was more to be done on the aquatic invasive species, why was there nothing in the massive budget of 2021 for invasive species in BC?
We are continuing to make sure that we are working with to deal with aquatic invasive species. Of course, there is ongoing funding for things like the Asian carp, for things for sea lampreys, and of course, we know that there's been challenges this year with regards to the quagga mussels. We are continuing to work, in collaboration with and to get science to make sure that we make the right decisions with regards to these species. It is a challenging. It is.
But there's nothing in budget 2021 for that. If I need to get another question in here if I can. If you've based these decisions that you say you have and you're proud of your department, if you've based them on science and sound reasoning, why have you not shared those reasons with the people whose lives are most directly impacted?
I would say that we actually have absolutely communicated to stakeholder groups, to First Nations on decisions. The management decisions are often very tough because it does mean that we have to, sometimes cut quota, sometimes cut total allowable catch, depending on where you are. These are tough, Mr. Arnold. There's no question.
But those reasons haven't been made clear to the stakeholders. As I mentioned, the spot prawn harvesters have no idea why the decision to reverse the interpretation. Public fishers haven't received an answer satisfactory to their questions. Many of them haven't received a response. Why?
And as I have said, with regards to the spot prawn specifically, I am 100% committed to getting this issue solved for the long term. We were able to work with the industry to have a plan in place for this year, but we will be making sure that there is a plan in place as we go forward. But that has to be done in consultation with the industry.
Thank you, Minister. The Cohen Commission was initiated in response to severe declines in Pacific salmon stocks, and the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative, or SSHI, was established in 2013, soon after the Cohen report, calling for more information. Since 2013, SSHI work has examined and reported on very important science. Why are you shutting down the SSHI program after having only completed 2 of the 4 phases of the investigation?
I am actually going to turn to my Deputy Minister for this one, please.
And I think, Rebecca, that's in your world as well.
Yes, so the SSHI was organized through a series of phases. And so we have completed phase 2 of the program. Phase 3, which is requires sort of the establishment of a wet lab, a facility, is not funded at this point. And so the work underway right now is writing up the papers, doing that type of activities while funding is sought for that next step.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 5 minutes or less, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you. I'm always surprised to hear the Conservatives talk about science when we know about all the cuts that they made to budgets for science and scientists. So we'll move on to a different topic, if you don't mind. A topic regarding shrimp and prawns. It's sometimes difficult for harvesters, especially since COVID in the UK, where these products are sold, the markets are practically non-existent. Does your department have discussions with the industry? Some harvesters in my region feel forgotten. I don't think that they've been forgotten, but it's because of the markets that things are difficult, and perhaps we could do something to identify markets in our country or elsewhere in the world, and not only in the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier, for the question. And I will say that, COVID-19 has impacted our fish and seafood processors in an extremely difficult way, and our harvesters. And we have seen a decline in our export markets. One of the things that we did last year when we realized how quick, relatively early on in the pandemic, that fish and seafood was going to be impacted, pretty much one of the first industries to be impacted. We made sure we put in place the Canadian Seafood Stabilization Fund, which allowed processors to kind of pivot from a fresh market product to be able to store longer. One of the things we recognized was that they didn't have that ability, also to do value added, and also to look for new markets. We also changed our the fund that was put in place actually to promote seafood over in other countries. We actually changed it so that we could promote it in Canada, and we are seeing an increase in the amount of seafood being consumed in Canada. I will say that it was Canadians who stepped up to help our processors, our seafood producers and our fishers last year, and I think that was extremely significant.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Comme vous.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And as you said, there are programs or funds that are there to identify new markets Madam Minister, another topic that concerns me, and we were able to discuss it a little bit. It's for fishing licenses in New Brunswick and other Atlantic provinces, fishing licenses for lobster in our region. It's worth 12-15 million over the past 2-3 years in my region and New Brunswick. Fishing licenses are going to Quebec, PEI, or elsewhere. One of the concerns, or one of the challenges, is the residence criteria in New Brunswick, which is 6 months, whereas in Quebec it's 2 years, for example. I would like to take the time to understand. If I understand correctly, Madam Minister, we want to work with the associations and with these people, and if we can change the resident criteria, then I think we could ensure that the licenses stay inside our community and in our province. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. With regards to the regulations around licensing, of course, as you mentioned, there are different criteria in different provinces with regards to the residents. And in New Brunswick, it is 6 months. Those regulations are actually developed in collaboration with industry. If industry wants to see those change, those are conversations that we are happy to have. But that has to be done at a table with regards to, you know, when we look at regulations and if it's something that the industry feels strongly about. I'm sure that this is a conversation that we are more than happy to have.
Juste parce que j'ai des collègues.
I have conservative colleagues like Mr. Bregnan who said earlier regarding former first prime ministers or premiers in the provinces. Did the government of New Brunswick communicate with your department to request a change of that residency policy to keep licenses in New Brunswick? Are you aware if the New Brunswick Conservative government made such a request?
I am not aware of any request to me directly, but I'm going to turn to my department and see if any request has come through my deputy.
No, we're not aware of any request at this time, although we are aware of the overall issue.
Parfait. Merci, Madame.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Minister, for those clarifications. I know that it's through working with associations that we'll be able to solve this issue, because losing licenses in our communities is quite damaging for our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll now go to Mr. Trudel for 2.5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier, I talked to you about Madame Bergeron from the Quebec Association of Atlantic Salmon, and she told us about adding Atlantic salmon to the list of species at risk. Does the minister know how the assessment is going? Because we're hearing in Quebec that the resource is doing well because it's being well managed, that it doesn't need to be added to the list of species at risk. What does the minister think of this?
There are currently ongoing consultations with regards to the Species at Risk Act and whether or not Atlantic salmon should be listed. I'm not sure where they sit right now. Deputy, do you have any more recent information?
Not a lot to add to that, Mr. Chair. I mean, we've finished our check-in on this recently. We're reviewing and developing the listing advice now.
Okay, on a entendu.
We also heard witnesses talk about the lack of scientific resources in order to make proper decisions on a smaller scale. Perhaps the department could put in place or innovate and have research on salmon to ensure that BC has enough resources and scientists to take proper decisions for conservation of the resource.
Our government has invested heavily in renewing science after it had been cut under the previous Conservative government, where I think we have hired more than 140 scientists at DFO directly since 2015. We are going to continue to work to get the best science available to make these decisions, because we know that that is how we have to do it. I will say that, in British Columbia, we have, and, actually on this call, we have some of the best scientists around in terms of making sure that they have the best possible science to make these decisions when it comes to fisheries management.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Minister. Thank you for appearing today at committee. I appreciate you being here. Minister, you supported my motion, M151, in 2018 to combat plastic pollution. And in that motion is combating industrial use of plastics. Now, we know how important the shellfish industry is to our economy and certainly to also future sustainability. But right now, the amount of plastics used in the industry is growing. And now it's our understanding that there's gooey duck applications coming forward that are PVC tubes that'll be used that break down, releasing toxins and microplastic particles that can permanently contaminate our waters where shellfish are grown, but also where our food supply is coming from and where herring and salmon are spawned and reared. What are you going to do to ensure that PVC and other types of plastic chemicals aren't being used in industrial use in our oceans?
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I think I agree with you that we have to take, the use of plastic seriously. As I said, I supported your motion. We know how important it is to get plastics out of our oceans. It's something that, I am committed to working with all of us to do. I think that I would like to have a further conversation with you about this, if that's possible at a later time, because I think it is something that we do have to make sure we're addressing, because fishery has to be sustainable for the long term. We need to make sure that we're not only conserving and protecting, but we're growing things to abundance. And in order to do that, we have to make sure we have the best practices in place.
Yeah. Thank you, Minister. And it is one area of the motion that the government hasn't really taken action on is industrial use of plastics. Minister, going back to the emerging science that I talked about, around Tenacibaculum, the PRV sea lice that has been science journal peer reviewed and acting in accordance with the precautionary principle to safeguard BC's critically low salmon runs. What are you going to do in terms of keeping in mind, obviously the precautionary principle is to be implemented in the absence of conclusive science, and that there is no fish farm policy to guide this. So it's really at your level of decision making. How will the department implement the inclusion of First Nations in the external advisory committee mentioned in the budget for salmon restoration?
I think Indigenous knowledge is going to be critical as we go forward. As I said earlier to MP Batiste, First Nations are the stewards of the land and of the water. They are the ones who, are committed to conservation. We all have to be. Having said that, I think that they will play a significant role in our Center for Expertise in making sure that we have the proper consultations, because Indigenous knowledge is going to be a driving part of this salmon strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to give my time to Mr. Zimmer from British Columbia.
All right, Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins, Mr. Chair, and our Minister. So getting back to the Sport Fishing Advisory Board and the questions I was posing to you before I ran out of time, this from the BC government, once again. We also encourage DFO to implement some of the specific fishery proposals that have been put forward that balance conservation with harvest opportunities where possible, including those mark selective fishing opportunities recommended by the Sport Fishing Advisory Board. So I'm going to read a document from the SFAB. This is their warning to the ministry and advice. In order to sustain both wild Chinook stocks of concern and the recreational and potentially other fisheries, it is critically important that DFO make the policy decision as soon as possible to implement mass marking of hatchery origin Chinook in BC to enable widespread mark selective fishery management when non-selective management poses too high of risk to stocks of concern. Minister, when are you going to implement a selective fishery in BC?
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. As I have said, we have put a pilot program in place with regards to a marked selective fishery. There needs to be an absolute more work done when it comes to making sure that they are not going to impact the stocks of concern. We are working on that now. We have put in place areas where there can be a marked select fishery.
Once again, Minister, I think you talk about a framework because you've talked about a framework for different things before. But in fairness, you haven't stated a framework for implementing a selective fishery in BC. It's a big thing. It's going to take some work to do. That's what the Department of Fisheries and Oceans should be working on as we speak, based on Cohen Commission recommendations and other advice. Let me just another quote from the SFAB. The SFAB cannot overstate the urgency of the situation and the critical need to implement Chinook mass marking as soon as possible. The recreational fishery infrastructure simply cannot survive widespread Chinook non-retention from April into July, and perhaps longer, around much of the inner south coast on an annual basis. We know from biosampling programs that sufficient numbers of hatchery origin Chinook are present in the Salish Sea during this time. We simply need a way for anglers to identify them in order to sustain both the fishery and unenhanced Chinook stocks of concern. Minister, we need a better answer than you're just going to do a test this summer. When are you going to implement a full-on selective fishery in BC?
We need to have the data on a marked selective fishery. That's why there is a pilot program. Your colleagues have talked about science, and we need to make decisions based on data. That's what we're doing right now. The decision on a marked selective fishery will happen once we have the proper data that shows it does not impact the stocks of concern.
Well, with respect, Minister, what's been already provided to you in terms of data is from the SFAB and many others. We have examples in Washington State and Oregon that have already gone through this process, and it's functional today. One more quote from the SFAB. It should be noted that because of sufficiently high mark rates, the opportunity exists now to implement a marked selective fishery management for Chinook at certain times. As a generalization, these potential opportunities occur around the south end of Vancouver Island and into the lower Strait of Georgia in the winter to late May period, enabled by the presence of significant numbers of U.S. and therefore adipose fin-clipped hatchery origin Chinook. Minister, you have the data. Why don't you just do it?
As I have said, there are stocks of concern that we have to be aware of. A marked select fishery, conservation always has to be our priority. Right now, a marked select fishery does not allow for fishing in an area where there are stocks of concern.
That's why it's called the selective fishery, Minister, is you can selectively not catch the stocks of concern.
Selective fishery, Mr. Zimmer.
Pardon me?
I said I'm well aware of why it's called a marked select fishery.
So I guess with all the data that's been presented to you and by the experts that you call on to give you advice, they've even offered that this can be done now. This can be established right now. And yet we hear stalling after stalling after stalling examples from the department about establishing a selective fishery. Even the ability to have machines that mark fish have been turned down, we've understood. So, Minister, you know, it's been given many opportunities for you to get to an easy yes answer on this. A lot of evidence, a lot of data, a lot of BC fishing families, frankly, relying upon a good decision based on data, based on science that you yourself have solicited, and you're just simply not listening to it because you want to still prevent that from happening for some reason. So I guess I just need a clear answer. If you're not going to listen to the data provided, what is it going to take?
Actually, Mr. Zimmer, you've gone way over time, so the time for an answer is well past. I'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you want to fill in any final comments on the last line of questioning, Minister Jordan?
As I've said many times, Mr. Hardy, the marked select fishery is not something I am opposed to. I think it's actually, a good idea. We just need to make sure that I have the right science and data that is backed up, that makes sure there is not a challenge within areas of concern. I will continue to say that.
Now, can we talk a little bit about hatcheries, because that has come up quite often. In fact, during our discussions on the big bar slide and the work that was going on there, we did venture into that issue. Where are we headed in terms of, perhaps getting a hatchery strategy in place?
So with regards to the salmon strategy, some of the money, of course, is for conservation-based hatcheries. We are actually looking at a number of ways that we know that hatcheries play an important role in the conservation and protection of wild Pacific salmon. So I think that with regards to hatcheries, that's going to be part of the bigger picture as we go forward with the salmon strategy.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely need to be very, very close to community hatcheries and a lot of consultation with Indigenous groups, because they have some very clear ideas on this one. I think Mr. Morrissey has some questions as well, so I'll turn over the remaining time to him.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Madam Minister, in my riding and a number of ridings in PI, my colleagues are facing, harbors in their ridings are facing challenges with dredging. It seems to be growing worse each year. Some of it is driven by climate change. Could you speak to that issue and the increase in the budget for small craft harbors in being able to address what is a dangerous problem and a growing problem at quite a few ports here in Prince Edward Island?
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. I'm well aware of the challenges that are being faced with regards to shifting sands in Prince Edward Island, some harbors that are being negatively impacted, particularly around Malpex and Savage Harbor, I believe. Those are two of the worst ones. Of course, the $300 million that's in the budget this year for small craft harbors will help with those problems, recognizing that there are a number of small craft harbors that need work, whether it's dredging, whether it's infrastructure. This is an ongoing issue for our rural coastal communities. We know how important they are to our rural economies, but sadly they have been left to fall to disrepair in over a number of years. Our government has actually put $787 million in the last 5 years into small craft harbors. And this is a significant investment, and I know that there's a lot of work to be done, and I was very happy to see that $300 million. As the members of this committee who I've worked with before know that this has been something that I've been talking about for a long time.
Yes, and there's quite a few. Minister, one of the programs you fought for last year was the Fisher benefit, which was extremely important. My question now is, there was, I believe, if I got it right, there was 40% of the funds held for this year, and the department was supposed to begin the application process a while back. So my understanding, it is still not available. Could you update this committee on the status of that program and when Fishers will be able to apply for the final payment?
Fish Harvester Benefit and Grant was an extremely important program to help the fishers and the captains and crew, specifically share crew, get through COVID-19. Some of them were able to make some pretty difficult decisions on whether or not they were going to fish because that funding was available to them. As you said, 60% was released last year, with the other 40% being released once they were finished with the season. And I will say that the program was actually extended on the other end, so we had to push it a bit this year as well. So where it was supposed to end, I can't remember exactly the dates of it last year. It was extended by about 5 or 6 weeks, so to allow more people to take advantage of it. So it got extended again this year. I would like to turn to my department though and see if they have any update on timelines for when it can be applied for now.
We're looking at June 28th. That's our plan.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Chair, what's my time? I think it looks like it's over.
Your time is up.
If it is, then I simply want to thank the Minister for her clear responses to questions that I had for her today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. And as we said, your time is up, and actually the committee time is up as well. I'll close off by thanking the Minister once again for being here today and making herself available with her officials for the full 2 hours. You've always been obliging to come to committee anytime we've asked. And
point of order,
and you've
Chair.
never skimped on time. Point of order?
Yeah, Chair, just Bob Zimmer here in the room. Just a quick one.
Oh.
I just had just to follow up the names requested by Ms. Reid or for Ms. Reid. Just would ask that she would provide them to the committee. I asked her early on and she was going to provide. Just wanted to remind her that that would happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Zimmer. So I'll wish everybody a good evening and thank everybody for the participation today. Thank you to our analysts and our clerk and interpreters for making this another successful FOPO committee meeting. Good evening to everyone, and we'll see you next week. Meeting adjourned.